It arrived at the offices of the San Francisco Chronicle on a Tuesday morning. An ordinary envelope, mixed in with letters to the editor. But inside was a piece of a car's dashboard, and a letter that began with 3 words that would send a chill down the spine of an entire nation. This is the Zodiac speaking. He claimed to have killed 7 people. He demanded his message be printed on the front page, and he included a cipher, a code of 340 mysterious symbols, a mix of letters, alien-looking shapes, and astrological signs. He boasted that if the code was cracked, it would reveal his name. For over 50 years, that cipher, known as the Z340, remained unbroken. It became a holy grail for amateur sleuths and professional cryptographers alike, a taunt from the grave, or from a killer who had simply vanished. But what if it's finally been solved? Not by the FBI or a team of supercomputers, but by someone you'd never expect? This is a story about obsession, a digital ghost, and the desperate hope that a 5-decade-old mystery can finally be put to rest. My name is Medium Satch, and this is American True Crime Files. To understand the way of this breakthrough, you have to go back to the terror. The Zodiac killer stalked Northern California in the late 1960s and early 70s. His attacks were random, brutal, and he reveled in the media attention. He was more than a murderer. He was a psychological terrorist. His ciphers were his ultimate weapon of control. The first cipher was cracked in just a few days. It was rambling, narcissistic, and it didn't contain his name. But the second cipher, the Z340, was different, more complex, more sinister. It withstood every attempt to break it. The FBI's best cryptanalysts failed. The NSA's supercomputers failed. It became a monument to his ego and our failure. It was a masterpiece of misdirection, designed to be his lasting laugh at the world. The case grew cold. The Zodiac faded from the headlines, but never from the public's imagination. He became a ghost, his cipher a locked door. Our story now shifts from the foggy streets of 1970 San Francisco to a spare bedroom in a suburb of Austin, Texas, in 2020. This is where we meet our protagonist. Let's call him David. David is a detective. He's a 38-year-old software engineer, a man who speaks in code, but the kind that runs servers, not serial killers. The pandemic had locked him in his house, and he was looking for a project, a distraction. He stumbled upon the Z340 cipher online, almost by accident. It was just an abstract thing, but when you're staring at it on a screen, it becomes personal. It's a challenge, a puzzle left on the table for 50 years. David's harmless trying quickly became an obsession. His girlfriend would find him at 3 a.m., surrounded by printouts, his whiteboard a chaotic mess of symbols and algorithms. It was all he talked about. He'd come to dinner and start explaining homophonic substitution. It felt dark. He wasn't sleeping. David's approach was different. He was a problem solver. He wrote a program that could run millions of pattern recognition sequences, testing for errors Zodiac might have made. He believed the key wasn't in being smarter than Zodiac, but in finding a crack in his arrogance. A mistake. For months, nothing. His code returned gibberish. I hope you have a lot of time. The Zodiac had once written. The taunt felt more personal than ever. Then, one Tuesday night, it happened, David's program, which he'd left running overnight, pinged. It had found a statistical anomaly, a tiny, almost imperceptible seam in Zodiac's armor. His heart was just hammering in his chest. It was 2:17 a.m. The house was completely silent. He felt like he'd found a secret door everyone else had walked past for 50 years. His hands were shaking so bad, he could barely type. David focused his algorithm on that single anomaly. He ran the program again. The symbols on his screen began to shift, to resolve. Letters started to form. Words began to emerge from the chaos. It wasn't a grand confession. The first line that decoded clearly was chilling in its mundane evil. It read, "I am not afraid of the gas chamber." He had done it. David, a software engineer in his pajamas in Texas, had cracked the uncrackable cipher. But the initial euphoria was quickly replaced by a cold, creeping dread, because the message wasn't what anyone expected. The decoded Z340 was not a proud signature. It was a rambling, paranoid, and deeply narcissistic rant. It spoke of slaves to the afterlife. It taunted the police. But buried within the madness was a name. Not a full name, but a first name, and a location that felt less like a factual clue and more like a piece of shattered mirror. Ask Dan in Riverside. Riverside, California, 1966. A young college student named Sherry Jo Bates was murdered in a brutal attack. The case was never solved. But months after her death, the police received a typed letter. It read, "Bates had to die. There will be more." The writing style, the taunting tone. It was eerily similar to the Zodiac's later letters. Many investigators had long believed it was his first kill. The Riverside connection was always the ghost in the machine of the Zodiac investigation. If the Zodiac did kill Sherry Jo Bates, then Dan in Riverside isn't just a random name. It's a piece of the puzzle. But who is Dan? A friend? A witness? An accomplice? Or is it him? David, now working with a retired detective, began to dig. They combed through digitized yearbooks, searched through old phone directories. They found a promising candidate, a man named Daniel James Hyde. He had been a student in Riverside at the time. He was an avid hunter. He had moved to the Bay Area in 1968. And most intriguingly, he had died in a car accident in 1975, right around the time the Zodiac's letters suddenly stopped. It felt too perfect. It was like they were being led. Every piece fit, the timeline, the locations. They started to believe they had him. Daniel James Hyde. They were ready to go public. They thought they'd solved it. But the Zodiac case is a maze, and for every door that opens, two more slam shut. As they prepared their findings, David, the meticulous engineer, decided to run one final verification. He fed everything they knew about Daniel Hyde back into his decryption model. The computer churned, and it produced nonsense. The model that had worked so perfectly before now spat out gibberish. David's blood ran cold. He had made a fatal flaw. He had assumed the Cipher was a single layer. But what if it was a Russian nesting doll? What if the name Dan wasn't the solution, but another part of the code? The Zodiac was a sadist and a narcissist. The idea that he would simply give his name away is ludicrous. He would want to prove he was smarter, even in defeat. A multi-layer cipher, a solution that leads to another puzzle. That is exactly his style. It's the ultimate gotcha. David realized with horrifying clarity that Dan in Riverside wasn't an answer. It was a red herring. A deliberate clue designed to send investigators on a wild goose chase. He hadn't outsmarted the Zodiac. He had fallen for a 50-year-old trap. He felt sick. He had spent over a year of his life on this. He'd almost accused a dead man of being one of America's most notorious monsters based on a lie the killer himself had planted. The arrogance. He felt the Zodiac's laughter echoing across the decades. He was still winning. The emotional crash was devastating. David deleted his files. He wiped his whiteboard clean. He told the detective it was a dead end. The hope that had fueled him turned to ash. The cipher was solved, but it had given them nothing but a phantom. Weeks passed. David tried to move on, but the cipher haunted him. Not the symbols, but the man behind them. The sheer, relentless cruelty of it. And then a thought occurred to him. What if the real cipher wasn't a Z340 at all? He looked at the entire communication history of the Zodiac. The letters, the phone calls, the ciphers. He stopped looking for a name and started looking for a pattern of behavior. The need for credit. The escalation of threats. The spelling errors. He wasn't a cryptographer anymore. He was a profiler. David's new theory was this. The Zodiac was not a brilliant mastermind. He was a man of average intelligence, pathologically narcissistic. The ciphers were not meant to be ultimately solved. They were a performance, a magic trick. Their primary purpose was to make him look like a genius, to keep the spotlight on him forever. The fact that the Z340 remained unbroken for so long was his greatest success. He didn't want us to know who he was. He wanted us to be forever wondering how he did it. The mystery was the point. His identity was irrelevant. His legacy was the puzzle. And we've been playing his game ever since. So, was the code finally solved? Yes. The technical decryption was a monumental achievement. It broke the symbols. But the message inside was a lie. The true, uncracked cipher was never the Z-340. It was the Zodiac himself. A cipher of ego, violence, and a desperate, pathetic need for attention that we are still trying to cipher to this day. The hunt for a name continues. But perhaps the real closure isn't in finding a name in an old yearbook, but in finally understanding the man behind the mask. A man not of brilliant complexity, but profound, simple, and terrifying emptiness. The code was solved, but the monster remains, his true identity as elusive as ever, hidden not behind symbols, but in the shadows of our own fascination. Subscribe for more chilling true crime stories and real-world-inspired dramas. Like, comment, and share. Hit the bell for update on new stories. For American True Crime Files, I'm Meedim Satch. Thank you for listening.